Continuing with a theme of speakers from CHTC, our next speaker is Cole. Cole's one of our newer developers still. He's been with us for 3 years.
I hope the slides will work.
And if the slides don't work, we'll have no one to fix them.
It would be really embarrassing for sure. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Cole. I'm here to talk about the wonderful world of high throughput computing with Open OnDemand. Normally, I don't like to have a background slide on who I am and stuff, but I feel like it's a bit important right now. Who am I? As Greg mentioned, I'm a CHTC developer. I work on the HTCon-Door software suite. Why does this matter? Open OnDemand is a different project by a different group. It's not under our purview. So I'm coming at this with a lens of, as a Condor developer, looking at on-demand and how things come together. This presentation, it's not going to be about, how wonderful on-demand is and a tutorial or demo on how to run it. It's more of a report of kind of what I've been looking into and things that have been brewing in the actual wild with on-demand in the high throughput computing field. But to begin with, we got to know what Open OnDemand is. For those that don't know, Open OnDemand is a software project developed by Ohio Supercomputing Center. Their main goal was to make all their supercomputing resources available to users anywhere at any time with no client-side installation. It is actually kind of crazy. I believe I saw a presentation from a couple years ago where they actually access their Slurm cluster from a Tesla interface. Pretty crazy. But yeah, basically their goal was to be users just need a web browser. As long as they have a web browser and they're able to use our system, or they allow the user to use our system, they can access their computational resources. Open OnDemand provides what's called applications to interact with compute clusters. This is a very quick and dirty diagram. It's actually, well, I don't want to say quick and dirty. This is in their official documentation. It's a kind of high-level overview of the architecture. I'm not going to dive into it, but it kind of shows off this user comes in as a client from a web browser, comes to Open OnDemand, and they're able to interact with these batch computing systems. What are Open OnDemand applications? There's two types that are defined. The first one are passenger apps. These are functionality executed by per user Nginx web front. I'm not familiar with Nginx, so I don't want to say web front end, but they're puns. I love puns. But these kind of run like first-class Ruby code on demand. This does really nifty stuff like file system management. You can get cluster status information as this thing called the job composer to place jobs into a backing system, and it allows even shell access to the submit host. The other type are interactive apps. These are functionality that's launched as a job into the backing compute cluster. These are things like Jupyter notebooks, virtual desktops, VS Code, many, well, maybe not many, dozens more. I explicitly did dozens after I remembered Marone saying many is a bad word. Not many dozens, yes. But yeah, so there's basically these two flavors of applications. One is essentially first-class integrated into on-demand, and the other one is more higher level, like execute a job in the batch system to give functionality back to the user. So what's new? The HTCondor adapter. This is something I didn't cover, so what is an adapter? The adapter is the part of software in the Open OnDemand software stack that knows how to speak a specific batch system, right? An adapter for Slurm exists, an adapter for LSF, PBS, I think, Kubernetes, there's a bunch, but now there's an HTCondor adapter. This came out in version 4 of Open OnDemand, early 2025. I do want to say this was community contributed. It wasn't by the on-demand people, it wasn't by us, it was one of you wonderful people who just has too much time on their hands, I guess. So there's no documentation, and I kind of see this as experimental, which is kind of why I was tasked to look into this and see how it conflicts and goes with the flow of how we think about things. But I will say, it was really easy to configure. I got on-demand version 4, set it up in front of a mini Condor, and just said, there's my access point, and went away. However, there's bad news. It's experimental. Things don't work as we would like them to. The first thing or issue that I found was the job composer is just broken. As Marone says, a job is money in the bank, and if we can't place jobs, then there's all our money in our broken bank. However, good news, the job composer is officially deprecated in on-demand. So you might be wondering, why am I up here saying this is bad news that the job composer is broken when it's deprecated and going away? I think it's because it shows this fundamental issue with the adapter as is, where there's this mismatch of what on-demand is passing to the HTCondor adapter and what it's expecting to get. And I see these as just actual bugs in the adapter that need to be fixed. These can also cause other issues for other apps. Interactive apps go through the job adapter. I remember when I was messing around with stuff, I was like, why is my interactive app not working? This is so weird. And it was difficult to debug. We all know what Condor logs are like. I did not like the Open OnDemand logs as much. The second issue I saw was submit description disconnect. So in Slurm land, when on-demand, jobs are composed of scripts or executables to run and a bunch of additional batch options for, input, amount of resources I need and that sort of stuff. This is perfect for batch systems such as Slurm, where all of this information is actually ingrained in the batch script that they're submitting, right? You have all your SBatch commands at your top of your shell script, and then there's all your shell stuff to run. You just SQ it, let it run. But Condor has a bit of a different way of doing things, where our submit description files are just description files. They tell you where everything is, where everything goes, how the job should look, what they should do, when they should take off their socks, when they should call Marone and say, I'm not working anymore. But they don't have the executable ingrained in them. I'm not saying that's where we should go. Is that a flaw on our side? Is that just a different in fundamentals? Who knows? But what this leads to is users are unable to provide this extra job information via submit descriptions, right? On-demand is expecting a script, an executable, and that's what they have to provide. So there's no way to give all this extra information. So they can only give extra information from the interfaces that on-demand provide, which is a bit easier with interactive apps, but I'm not gonna get into that today. The third issue I found was an assumption of shared file systems. I'm not gonna say it's required. There are clever things that you can do to still run without shared file system, and Marone's gearing up to tear me a new one.
I mean, the previous thing that it expects a script, which Todd would love to call it a wrapper script, is that it assumes a shared file system. And the script itself is doing what the submit file does. It says, I know what the executor, what are the parameters, what are the inputs, what if I have to modify, if I have to create symbolic length, and all the kind of is in the script, and then go. So the script itself is actually fork execing the executable. And we have been fighting to get rid of the script, because once you put in the script, everything that happens at the script level is not visible to us, so we cannot do anything and not can help. So I would say, and let's keep going, but the fact that they assume a script and they assume a shared file system, tightly coupled, because of the HPC view of the world.
Yep, that's a very good point. Thank you, Marone. Yes, assumption of shared file system. The adapter is able to place Condor jobs that do file transfer, but there's some subtleties here. There's no way to actually describe file transfer. Actually, in fact, the Open OnDemand HTCondor adapter currently stomps any defined input transfer. this is kind of an issue on Condor's side. Let me back up. The reason for this is because Open OnDemand, as Marone kind of alluded to, is expecting the scripts in a shared file system, tight coupling to do all this nicety. So it sets the executable to a shell, and then it passes the actual script or executable you have provided as the input transfer. And then this gets to the second issue of Condor only has one input file transfer list, right? OnDemand is trying to do some other extra cleverness and add something to the list, but it's not clever enough to know like, oh, I should do a union of these two things. It just says, I know I need this thing to run, so I'm gonna make it my input transfer. And this gets into Condor, there's no multi-source composition for input file transfer lists. I don't know if that is something we should go to or if a single list is correct. It's just something I noticed when looking into this. The other thing along shared file systems is interactive apps are actually comprised of multiple scripts. When you're an admin developing an interactive script to use in Open OnDemand, you provide a setup script, an actual execution script, and a cleanup script, and maybe one or two other special flavored ones if you want. And what OnDemand does is it actually makes one massive wrapper script around these, and it does this whole logic of stomping the shell. But in this wrapper script, they actually use absolute paths to these scripts that you've provided. And it's just a bit of a mess. But you can get things to work, but just a little bit of a assumption of those shared file systems. That's all I was going to cover for OnDemand. Like I said, bit of high level, kind of what I was looking into. Now I want to dive into some real world examples. First one is actually Access Pegasus. They actually use Open OnDemand in front of a bit of a super node. I believe it has OnDemand, HTCon-Door, and Slurm all built in. If you are curious, Mott's in the corner up here is the expert, but they really benefit from the authentication system that OnDemand has set up, right? If a user has access allocation, they can just access this resource. Another thing that is kind of going on is Open OnDemand's app first. This is kind of a higher level, first class, like one click install, like get an application going. I believe you're looking in Mott's and the Access team are looking into like a Pegasus HTCon-Door application. Am I not lying? Okay, thank you. Once again, not my wheelhouse. So if you have more questions, unfortunately, I'm going to defer to Mott's over there. The second example I thought was actually really interesting was AlphaFold on NRP Nautilus. This was some work done by a CS capstone team at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The concept here is they wanted to run AlphaFold workflows on NRP Nautilus, but they had some issues. They were unable to mount because AlphaFold requires a database that they have I believe, pre-set up on all these pods or gets there. I don't know specific details, so I feel like I'm failing right now, but they have these specific bits of information that they need to get there. And they're like, how do we do this? And they decided to use HTCondor as the middleman. So they put Open OnDemand in front of an access point. And the access point actually has this watchdog script that's sitting there looking for job pressure and sees, oh, Danny's submitted his 1,000th AlphaFold workflow today. I guess I'll spawn another pod in Nautilus. And then pod starts up, an execution, a pilot job of an HTC EP starts up, connects back, and we do our whole song and dance of start a shadow, transfer the stuff we need, execute. I will once again kind of defer. Derek over here, he knows more than I do about this if you have specific questions about this setup. But I thought it was very cool because it kind of made me think of like a miniaturized OS pool in a way, right? We're looking for this job presser and we're launching these pilots into NRP. We're just doing it in this small contained thing with all these pieces we know and love. The final thing that we've actually been looking into, when I say we, I specifically mean me and Matt Westfall in the front here, is launching HTCondor Annex through OnDemand. And in this case, we're actually launching it into a Slurm backend, but we're trying to use our new style HPC Annex, which I believe Todd will touch on later today, to hopefully allow a user to simply say, I want an annex for HPC, and then they go to OnDemand and say, hey, I have this annex for Condor, can you run it for me? And then all their jobs just run, hopefully. There's a bit of, subtlety and steps here. I hope to kind of get rid of this step of they have to explicitly copy this annex tarball from the access point over to the on-demand hosts, but it's early days. But in the end, I'll say what's next, right? There's this first class adapter. I think it's really cool. I think it has potential of actually directly accessing high throughput computing resources, but there's some fundamental differences in ideologies and just some simple bugs that need to be fixed regardless. I think it could be interesting, but in the end, I believe community interests will help drive looking into this, right? If there's a lot of interest, hopefully we'll do more investment. I don't want to say that guarantee, but the community can also get involved with feedback on functionality or even code contribution. Like I said, the original adapter was provided by someone in, maybe not exactly in this audience, but in the grand scheme of our software stack globally. And hopefully there'll be some more potential of interaction between on-demand developers and the CHG staff. I'm unsure. I do have a couple links at the bottom here. One of them is actually to a GitHub repo, which is a fully Dockerized on-demand into a mini Condor instance that you can run. In this case, it's a mini Condor, so there is a shared file system because all of the daemons are running on one host. And I did also link this full 8-page lame report. You don't have to read it, but if you were actually interested, you could. It kind of goes more into depth of everything I talked about. But anyways, that is the end of my talk. No questions. That's crazy.
Any questions for Cole?
I see a comment.
A comment.
Maron's got a smile. That's why I say that.
It's at least I have been continuously under fire by unnamed entities that why we are not doing and why don't we expose more of Open OnDemand to our community. And it has been a struggle because of some of what Cole shared with us, and that was also what motivated sending Cole out to play around with it. So yes, being able to use the web interface to compose whatever is needed to submit the job can be useful. There is a huge elephant in the room that Cole didn't mention, and that is how do you, behind you, didn't you see? How do you communicate back to the researcher when things go wrong? So everything you heard from Cole is moving forward. And we learned that the real difficulty, we even heard it earlier this morning about how do I know that the schedule is not there? Becomes extremely challenging. But anyone who has experience with Open OnDemand, loves Open OnDemand, I think it's the best thing that happened since sliced bread, please talk to us. Maybe easier to talk to Cole because he's less skeptical than I am. And let's see if there is, what can we do to leverage We are doing it for the annex. So we are saying, okay, we are talking to a Slurm cluster. Let's use Open OnDemand to deliver what we need, and then we'll do whatever is needed. So help us to bring anything from the Open OnDemand ecosystem into the HTC world.
I think we have a question from Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Question from Zoom. Can you elaborate a bit on the Annex integration? Is this going to be an Open OnDemand app or a command line that the user invokes via Open OnDemand?
Yes, so I've actually been developing an interactive app. So this is something that their kind of model is make like a GitHub repo with, as I alluded to, there's these set of scripts. So there's a setup script and then the actual script to run the Annex in the system. So hopefully once we get things working, we can just kind of post it online. I mean, we're targeting our local Spark cluster right now, but maybe, you know, if things do work, we can publicly share this interactive app and then people can just go and be like, oh, I want to launch this Annex.
A question from Mr. Snakemeg.
Yeah, so I think it's great to see something kind of GUI-like for Condor after over 40 years of this project to support those non-terminal people. And this reminds me of a case yesterday we saw in CHTC where a user was trying to use VS Code to access the access point, and that was causing its own problems. And I imagine they were using VS Code because it also provides something a little closer to a graphical interface for that. So my question is, Open OnDemand solves one part of the overall graphical interface for kind of placing jobs and constructing workflows of jobs. Has CHTC or have you done any surveys of the other types of graphical interfaces people are already trying to use to interact with Condor? Or have you decided that Open OnDemand is the solution to use, and so you're not as interested in exploring some of those other things that we see in use already?
I'm going to boldly claim we are looking into the various things. I don't think it's like, I personally haven't been looking into a bunch of things, but I know Brian Bockelman has been looking into like his own little homebrew HTML web page. There's also, you know, Jupyter Notebook access and that sort of thing. And there are different things. I just don't know if we've done like a 10,000-foot view of all the possibilities. Because as Maron would probably say, graphical user interfaces are difficult.
Yeah, one thing I would say is we have a history of user interfaces, not necessarily in this graphical things like device, and we invested quite a bit in it. I don't know what the overall budget of Open OnDemand is, and all they do is Open OnDemand. And so if we want to do more graphical interfaces, then we have to stop doing certain things. And you just gave me yesterday a hierarchy of caches that are talking to each other and all that kind of thing. I say, you know what? No caches, no this. We are user interfaces. Then it's a trade-off. And philosophically, I found user interfaces coming in and saying, oh, it's easy. Here's all you have to do, da, 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 and yes, you start doing it this way, and then you want to go a little bit beyond this, and bad news. So I'm not sure that in the long run we are doing the right service to the community at large by telling them this is a no-brainer. We will hide everything and it will be beautiful. Maybe you can get early, maybe it's good for classes, but for workload, yes, I mean, earlier today, we talked to somebody who wants to do 500,000 jobs. That's what worries me.
Okay, let's give a final round of applause for Cole.